Hello boys and girls, Lord Hawkeye here again, and welcome to part 2 of my indulgent little trip down memory lane, Warcraft style. Well, the aforementioned shaking up came with the World of Warcraft's first expansion, the Burning Crusade. Oh, words couldn't describe how we felt when we stepped out through the dark portal and a fresh new world of Outland stretched before us. Oh, there was much complaining from the raiders who realized that their once proud epic gear was going to be replaced by questing greens, but it didn't seem long for them to get over it. The experience of exploring a new world and new content was well worth it even to them. And a mighty fine experience it was, let me tell you. Outland was a real treat for the eyes, boasting a wide variety of terrain that very much gave the impression of being on an alien world where geology doesn't work the same as our own. The Burning Crusade also introduced many new features, including a new profession, new races, paladins and shamans being available to both factions, and flying mounts to allow us to see the world in a whole new perspective. Burning Crusade is frequently hyped for having the best challenge, and while I will agree that it had improved on that since vanilla, a lot of the challenge went in the wrong direction, I find. One notable issue with dungeons in Burning Crusade that I'm surprised to find few ever bring up is the fact that, strangely, it was all concentrated in trash content instead of the bosses. The trash fights were notoriously difficult and unforgiving, much of the time necessitating heavy use of crowd control, and woe to you if you were a DPS without good crowd controls. Yet on the other hand, most boss fights were underwhelming by comparison, honestly. Yes, for all the hype about Burning Crusade gets for challenge, think back. How many dungeon bosses can you think of who were truly challenging? Not that many would be my guess. I have mentioned before that while Blizzard's attempt to make paladin tanks viable was commendable, they rather annoyingly designed content around the paladin's far superior AoE threat building, which caused me to feel shortchanged as a warrior tank, so I will admit my personal experience with Burning Crusade was quite soured as a result, but I will try not to let that cloud my view of this expansion. Then, of course, came raiding. The first was Karason. Karason was a great introduction to Burning Crusade raids, and it remained many people's favorite thereafter, and for good reason. While it was long, even had a few sections where the trash started to overstay its welcome, the constantly changing atmosphere and tones made sure it never felt repetitive. It boasted a colorful boss lineup that came in all shapes and sizes with many very unique and innovative mechanics. Karason was a great step forward compared to Vanilla's introduction to raiding. Next would come several raids in the next tier. Magtheridon's Lair was a one-shot dungeon much like Onyxia, which I neglected to mention in the last video. Magtheridon was largely ignored at first due to fight mechanics that made him more trouble than he was worth, but once he was properly balanced, he was overall an enjoyable fight. The Eye and Serpent Shrine Cavern made up the bulk of this tier, however. Both of them ended with fights against major lore characters who were notoriously complex, but it did feel suiting to them to make them climactic as they deserved to be. The raid challenge was rising fast again, which was starting to cause a repeat of what transpired in Vanilla, however. By the next tier, the Black Temple, raiding was once again feeling inaccessible to the majority of players who were drifting away due to having nothing to do. The Black Temple, while itself was a very well-designed and lore-filled environment, it shared very little lore outside, which illustrated one problem Burning Crusade had which it did not fix from Vanilla: the plot. Vanilla had very little in the way of an overarching storyline. The Burning Crusade did have a more tightly knit plot, but it wasn't delivered very well, resulting in many players saying things like, "Wait, who's this Illidan guy?" Which is a real shame because Illidan is a major lore character, yet he didn't feel as such when we were exploring Outland. If I recall correctly, there was one quest only where you got even a glimpse of him. The rest of the time, he's barely even mentioned. The Black Temple itself? Well, you could call it AQ 2.0, honestly, in that it was an improvement over AQ, but it also carried similar problems that AQ had. Mainly that rain content was again feeling too restrictive, and it did get a little bit long and drawn out at times. Few ever set foot in it, and fewer still ever got to experience the very dramatic final battle with Illidan, which is a real shame. By the time the final tier had come out, the Sunwell, it seemed Burning Crusade had come full circle. While the Sunwell Daily Quest Hub did give a little more plot and character than Nax, it still gave very little to the outside observer in the way of plot incentive. Also, like Nax, it suffered the same problem of being a raid whose good qualities were wasted because only about 1,000 guilds in the entire world had ever even entered it, and even fewer got past some of the more infamous fights like Brutalis and Muru. Burning Crusade did make an attempt to give more plot incentives to its raids by including attunement quests that the player had to complete before they could enter, which gave them a little backstory on it. Unfortunately, this only served to raise the barriers to entry even further, causing even more players to simply ignore raids. In the end, Karason was by far the most popular raid because it had the lowest barrier to entry, while Sunwell was almost completely unnoticed by the majority of players, and those who did run it were forced to resort to class stacking, everyone changing professions to leatherworking for drums and other extreme measures simply to clear the content. So to sum Burning Crusade up, it was an improvement over vanilla overall, no question about that, but it still hadn't completed the checklists of things that needed to be fixed. Mainly the issues of class pigeonholing, lack of immersive plot, and the fact that raiding still had too high a barrier to entry. After all, say what you like about content being too easy, content that you can't even play is content that might as well not even be there, right? World of Warcraft was coming into its own now, but it wouldn't truly cement itself as the MMO for everyone until another expansion would come along and address these issues. Join me then when we talk about Wrath of the Lich King. Until then, be aware and be wise.